Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Lights on Data show. I'm George Freecan, and I'm your host. In this episode, we are joined by Eric Dodds, Head of Product Marketing at RudderStack, the warehouse native CDP. So in this episode, we are stepping in, as usual, into the world of data. But this time, we will uncover the biggest mistakes companies make with their data, and more importantly, how to set things right. Eric brings a decade of experience, having advised giants like BMW and WeWork and other innovative startups on data strategy. So, whether you're a data enthusiast, a business leader, or simply curious about the art of managing data, this conversation is your compass to avoid the pitfalls and unleash the power of your data. So, let's dive right into it and get ready to supercharge your data driven decisions. Welcome, Eric.
George, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And you're really not a stranger of being behind a microphone. You're also the co-host of the Data Stack show, too.
That's right. Yeah, we have been around for about 3 years as a show and it's closing in on 200 episodes. So yeah, we talk about data every single week with all sorts of people.
Yeah, I've listened to a couple of your episodes too, and I wonder, does it feel weird to be on the other side of the person being interviewed?
It is a little bit weird, but
Mhm.
I think about it as a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very curious about data and curious about people. And so yeah, I think the more you can let your curiosity lead, it doesn't necessarily matter which side of the mic you're on. But yeah, it is a little bit weird to be a guest because I'm usually the one saying welcome.
And asking more questions as you're maybe not answering as many in your role.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny. Because I'm also I work in data management, data governance as well. So I tend to be on the receiving end at times, but I've got an adjuster like you to play both roles. All right, let's talk about you, and let's talk about your role really at RudderStack and some of the learnings that you gain out of that, because you also lead the management of their internal data stack,
Yep.
including the data pipelines, infrastructure that drive marketing, reporting, and activation. So you do have a lot of experience with customer data infrastructure. What are some of those most common mistakes that you've observed companies make when it comes to managing and utilizing their customer data?
Yep. So I think that there are really two key areas that I see, and both of them have to do with. And this may sound a little bit funny at the outset. Both of them have to do with the way you approach abstracting data from the tools where that data is used by an end user. And so let me give you a couple of examples of that. When you think about data being used by an end user, it could be something like analytics.
Hmm.
And analytics could be consumed in a variety of ways. It could be consumed through a cloud, third party cloud platform like Google Analytics, product analytics like Amplitude. You could be looking at something more like business intelligence and Tableau. But then customer data is also used in tons of other different types of tools. Customer success tools are collecting customer data in the form of support tickets
Hmm.
and responses or chat transcripts, right? For companies that have sales processes, you have opportunity stages that probably live in Salesforce, and the list goes on and on. And so the first challenge that a lot of companies face is that if you aren't abstracting that data collection and integration into a layer of its own, you run into what I call the custom field problem, or stated a little bit more long winded, the problem where in order to do quarterly reporting, someone is exporting a bunch of CSVs out of a bunch of different tools and writing some really complex VLOOKUPs to try to understand what's going on, right? And the nature of those problems is affects every single business. And so thinking about some of the tools that we just mentioned, a classic example is the marketing team says, I'm looking at Google Analytics and I'm tracking events via Google Tag Manager, et cetera. And so I see this many conversions, right? And the person who's looking at Salesforce says, there you're counting 20 more leads than I see, and I'm
Hmm.
counting distinct email addresses. And customer success is saying, sales, that's actually not true because those are people who are part of existing accounts that we already have in our customer success system. And the whole problem is that a VP is saying, I just need you to tell me how many new leads we got, right? And that ends up being a very difficult question to answer. Now, why is that? It's because of abstraction. It's because Each of those tools is instrumented individually and is collecting data according to its own definitions, which
Yeah.
are by nature fundamentally different from each other, right? Even if you think about systems like a marketing tool versus Salesforce, the marketing tool probably has a single definition for a user. I'm going to send an email to an individual user. Salesforce has the concept of both leads and contacts out of the box, right? And so now a user could fall into two different classifications. So, what's the first mistake? It's that you're using all of these different tools individually to try to collect what is actually the same data, right? When you create a new lead, someone is submitting a form, they're making a purchase, they're signing up for a newsletter, whatever that conversion action is. In the real world is actually one distinct action performed by one distinct user. And you just happen to be capturing that in 9 different ways with 9 different tools. And so, in consulting, before joining RudderStack and even in our own data stack, really the first step is getting data infrastructure that allows you to capture those user actions one time in one tool and then distribute it to all the downstream tools. And that way, that you have really you're looking at the same data in every single tool because it's coming from a single source as opposed to a bunch of fragmented sources.
Right.
So that's the first one. I'll stop there. I know that was a lot.
No, thank you. That's very comprehensive. And maybe just something to add to it. I think as you're setting up that infrastructure to capture data that you need, to also make sure that you are capturing according to the same definition across all these departments or different stakeholders. They're then asking for, oh, give me the customer data. Well, what do you mean? Give me the leads. It means differently, maybe from the VP's point of view than marketing point of view. And once you'll have that and you're working towards that common goal, against those common definitions too. And I guess that's what's also lacking, what you've identified, that you don't have that common layer above all these different tools capturing and producing data that sort of like uniforms it as well. And that's why, yeah, people then need to export an Excel and do
Yep.
some other transformation afterwards, and you all get different results. It's a known fact you're asking 3 different people within the IT department or data department to pull your report, and you could get 3 different ways of that being pulled, or 3 different totals, because they have different understandings on how to do that and where to get it
Exactly.
from.
Yeah. But it affects not just reporting. That's an easy example because no one likes the fire drill of exporting all that stuff and trying to get some semblance of the truth. But it also causes a lot of problems for the actual teams themselves. Marketing wants to send a campaign, but if they don't know to exclude customers who may have recently submitted a negative support ticket, you run the risk of sending an email that's going to make them even angrier, right? Because you're
Yeah.
promoting the feature that they had a problem with, or
Yeah.
whatever the case is.
Yeah. I have some follow-up questions, but maybe you're gonna tackle them in some of your next points. So let's go over that first. Let's go. Okay, that was the first issue. What's the second
Yep.
one that you've encountered?
The second issue is related and happens downstream. Let's say you do consolidate that, and we can talk about a bunch of those questions. But you have the same data, you have the same baseline data in each tool now, right? And let's say you live in a world where for a lot of companies, this is a pipe dream, but it's very possible. No pun intended on the pipe dream. But you have the same number of conversions in Google Analytics, in your product analytics tool, and Salesforce, and your marketing automation platform, et cetera, right? The challenge now is that once you have that and you know the number of leads and you can accurately report on some of those baseline, say, KPIs is generally what you focus on first. The next question is, we want to answer more complex questions about our data, right? We're not scrambling around trying to figure out the basics. We know the basics now, but of course, marketing is going to start asking interesting questions about conversion rates relative to the number of support tickets that someone has submitted, right?
Mhm.
So we now know we have the same customers in those 2 different platforms, the same set of data in terms of the number of customers and basic traits or whatever. But now I have a problem where I need data on the support tickets, and I need to combine that with data from my marketing automation tool so I can run a pivot on conversion rates, right? you end up actually going to the same place where, in order to do that, you are now exporting data from this customer success system
So you're back to
and the
the same
marketing
issue.
automation system. And so you end up going through the same challenge. And this is where we get to a bunch of buzzwords. You can call this a single source of truth. You can call this a 360-degree view of the customer, whatever term you want to use for it. But we'll just speak very plainly and say, once you have the basics down and you can trust that your data is accurate because you have a unified, abstracted layer for collecting data, you want to unify that data into a data set that has one row for every user, customer, account, etc., and then columns that represent everything you know about that customer, right? And so that's why a lot of people will call it a customer 360 view, right? But it's a comprehensive customer profile that represents everything about a user from every single system. And the big challenge, one of the other main mistake that I see companies make is that they try to build that single source of truth for customer records inside of one of those SaaS tools. And it doesn't really matter which one you choose, they're all going to fail. Salesforce is probably the most common. And one thing that I love asking people, and I used to ask this all the time, have you ever seen a Salesforce that is not a Frankenstein? Right? And the answer is no. And a lot of people think that's because of data hygiene, which I don't believe to be true. Really, the reason that's true is because you're trying to get Salesforce to handle a more complex data model than it is designed to handle. And so the punchline is that you really need to do that in some sort of data store, again, that is abstracted from the downstream tools. And most commonly, this is going to be a data warehouse or a data lake, where you are not bound by any data model. You can build a data model that matches your business, and it can easily include information from every single system, whether that's customer success, sales, marketing, information from your production database that's running your app, financial transaction data from your payment system, inventory data, etc. It's really, the data warehouse is really an unbounded, there are no limitations on building a data model and a set of comprehensive customer profiles that truly represent all the information you know about your customer.
And what about that data hygiene piece? And when you find an issue with your data, when you find duplicates among the same customer but in different platforms, do you try and tackle those at that source system level, or do you track and tackle them within this data warehouse environment?
It's much easier. It's much easier to solve those problems in the data warehouse. And
Hmm.
I'll tell you why. And this is a really compelling reason to adopt a warehouse native architecture for your customer data stack, where the warehouse is a single source of truth. When you think about something like duplicates, the problem with trying to solve it in the source system, say customer success, or let's use a classic example of customer success versus a sales tool. So a Zendesk versus a Salesforce or whatever. You quickly run into issues around duplicates because those systems are going to treat duplicates very differently, right? In Salesforce, you may delete duplicate records. In the customer success system, you may want to know that, because if someone tries to sign up twice or creates two different accounts, that's a really big problem for someone on the customer success team. They need to be aware of that, right?
Hmm.
And so duplicate information about duplicates may be helpful for customer success, right? You don't want to report on that out of your core KPIs, but that can be very difficult to reconcile across systems, because one team might say, we really don't have duplicates because our business use case is different, right? So when you adopt a warehouse native architecture and you're solving those problems with all of your customer data, you can apply global logic, which is generally going to be SQL statements or data models that can afford for all of those edge cases in every tool globally. so that when new data comes in, you're not having to deal with it writing custom logic or workflows in each individual tool. When new data from those tools is loaded into the warehouse, you have global logic that's easily updatable based on needs of the business. And you can just apply those rules across the entire data set.
Got it. Got it. And okay, and in setting that infrastructure, especially with companies that have been there out there for a while, and we don't have the beauty of doing everything how we wanted it from the start. So
Sure.
they've
Which
accumulated
is
all
most
this.
companies.
Yeah, most companies, exactly. Yeah. And they've accumulated all this technological debt, and they have all these different silos. How do we work with those silos? Do we try and reconcile them at that data warehouse level? Do we let them be, or do we try and break the silos? What's your take there?
Yep, that's a great question. Where do you start in solving this problem? And I would say that probably if you have a bunch of data silos, I would start by ingesting data from all those silos into a warehouse so that you have a centralized data store. And I think one of the big things that I learned over time is that you really want to believe that if I get a data warehouse and I pull data from all these silos into it, whew, I'm finished. And the reality is that it's a journey that lasts the life of a company,
Hmm.
because your business is always changing, your customers change, the products that you sell change, and so your data is going to change over time. And so the warehouse is the best place to manage that. You pull all your data in, and what I usually tell people is don't try to boil the entire ocean.
Hmm.
Start with some of those key KPIs. And we talked about a great symptom for this. Where are you exporting spreadsheets and CSVs to try to get reporting? And where is it painful? And where do you lose days or weeks of smart people's time every quarter doing that? That's a great place to start. Pull all of that data into the data warehouse, work with a data engineer and or an analyst to build some data models that are going to eliminate the need for you to export that data manually into spreadsheets and try to mung it to get some sort of accuracy. If you start there, you'll really feel the momentum, and the business will feel the momentum, right? Oh, it's not a fire drill and we have to do this.
Hmm.
Wow, we have way more trust in the numbers than we ever had. And then you can expand from there, right? And if there's one thing about data that you and I both know very well, when you start to get value from data, it's a virtuous cycle. And you answer one question and it creates five more really good questions. And so the appetite will grow naturally,
Yeah.
and you can augment the system from there.
Yeah. And yeah, so you mentioned working with the data engineers to create those pipelines. That on its own can be very complex depending on that environment as well and what you're trying to achieve. Do you have any advice on how to best streamline those data integrations?
Absolutely. This will be this will be very common territory for someone on your team who's a data engineer or a data professional. There are really two broad areas related to data ingestion that you need to think about. So the first one is breaking the data silos from all of those different individual business tools that we talked about. So your customer success tool, your marketing tool, your sales tool. All of those are structured data, and your data engineering team is going to be very familiar with a process called ETL, which stands for extract, transform, load. And there are vendors out there that are no code solutions for plugging your Salesforce account into your Snowflake or Databricks or BigQuery instance and pulling that data in on some schedule that you specify. So what does that look like? It means that you'll get a table that's a leads table from Salesforce, and an accounts table and an opportunities table. You'll get a table of tickets from your customer success tool. You'll get a list of your list tables that represent the segments or lists from your marketing automation tool and the campaigns that they're members of. And so you have all that raw data in your warehouse. And so that's step one when you talk about breaking data silos and solving for some of those initial KPI use cases that we talked about. would be batch ETL jobs that pull in the structured data from those different systems. So that's one. This is a very common pattern in the world of data. So again, anyone technical in your team will be familiar with this, and there are tons of great vendors out there that you can use to start getting those data flows going within hours even. And then, of course, you need to talk with your analyst and someone who can write SQL in order to start to combine that data, of course. So that's one. The other area is event data. So this is the first problem area we talked about, where you're sending conversions to Google Analytics and maybe your Meta and Google Ads platforms. You're sending lead creation. You're somehow creating leads when they sign up, or getting sign-up events into your marketing tool, your sales tool. All of those are event-based data, right? So you can think about data that's created when a user does something. Now, they end up as a lead in Salesforce, and you pull that in as a table. But when you think about events, that leads really represent a sign-up event. And that's very important for marketers. What did someone do? Which forms have they filled out, right? It's not that just I've created a lead in my marketing tool and my sales tool. It's that they did something to become a lead. And so you need pipelines that can handle event-based data and send those events to all of your different downstream tools. And that's actually RudderStack's bread and butter, is at the outset is setting up those event-based pipelines. You can install our code in your website, your mobile app, etc., and collect all of those user actions. And then we have over 200 integrations, so you can automatically send data downstream. And so just to give you an example, because I help run the data stack at RudderStack, when someone requests a demo, we capture that event once with RudderStack, and we have integration set up where we route that event to our marketing automation tool, Salesforce for our sales team, our product analytics tool, so that the product team can start tracking that user's adoption of the app. We send it to our data warehouse, which we use Snowflake. And so we have that raw data in our warehouse. And so we can actually do interesting analytics with that event data in our warehouse. And so we send it to Google Analytics so that our marketing team can track a conversion. We send it to Google Ads so that if it was someone who came from a paid ad, we're tracking that conversion. And all of that is completely automated by RudderStack. So we track the event once, and it's getting immediately distributed to all of those downstream destinations in real time. The other amazing thing is that those individual events also get sent to the marketing automation tool. And so you can trigger different campaigns based on user behavior data. So let's say someone signs up for the app, but then later they request a demo. We want to change the list that they're on in the marketing automation tool so that they're getting a different email flow, because now they're higher intent, right? They requested a demo, they want to see the platform. So we don't want to send them any more emails that are going to encourage them to request a demo, right? We want to send them different emails. And so again, all those events are getting streamed to these tools in real time, so we can leverage those in the downstream tools. So that's the second set of pipelines. And so those are the two abstractions, right? Abstract at the collection layer with events, and abstract all your structured data via ETL into your warehouse.
What's that fail safe if one of those destination systems breaks? There's now not a sync anymore between all these data pipelines. Do those events trigger that? Hey, let's stop on pushing that data. We're going to hold it somewhere, push it later on when that destination system becomes available.
Exactly. Yeah, I have a great story for you about that, George. Do you remember the whole GameStop Wall Street bets
Of course.
phenomenon? We have one of our customers is a really large consumer finance company where you can use their web app or mobile app to make investments, and they have a marketing automation tool downstream. And when the Wall Street bets phenomenon happened and people were buying GameStop and all the other stocks at a completely unprecedented rate, we were an event collection pipeline. So when people were doing these actions on their mobile phone, all that data is flowing through RudderStack. one side note, actually, one of the reasons that they chose us as a vendor is that we're warehouse native. So we don't actually store any of that data. Once it's delivered to your downstream destination via API or warehouse, we drop it from our system. So for companies in regulated industries, we're a really, really interesting option. But the amount of data that was flowing through overwhelmed the API of the marketing automation tool that they were using. So the way that they saw that or noticed that there was a problem was the marketing team saw their email send volume just go off a cliff. And so they thought there is some major problem here because we usually send about X number of emails per hour. They have millions of users, and so they're sending lots of email. And when that just falls off a cliff, there's a huge problem. And so what we realized was that RudderStack was ingesting all those events and routing them to that marketing tools API in real time. And we hit a rate limit. And so users stopped getting emails. And so the punchline is that RudderStack has back pressure measures in place where if a downstream API goes down, we start backing up all those events until it comes back online. And in this particular case, they reached out to the marketing vendor and said, you have to increase our API limits, which they ended up doing. And then all the events drained out to that API from our backup. And then, of course, when everything was confirmed delivered, we delete it from our system because we don't store any of that data for compliance reasons.
That's very cool. Thanks for sharing that story. We love stories. So I think, that message really hit the home run there. Do you have any other success stories that you want to share where companies maybe identified their mistakes in the data field, took some action there, and hey, now they have some improvements?
Absolutely. One common story that we hear a lot is around, I'll give you two quick stories. One is around marketing attribution and optimizing advertising spend. And the other one is about operationalizing AI and ML. And so I'll give you two quick stories. So when it comes to optimizing ad spend and understanding attribution, this is another really difficult problem that a lot of marketers face. And it's for the same reasons that we talked about earlier. A lot of times marketers are looking at slightly different sets of data and different platforms, right? So they may look in Google Analytics and be able to see, okay, I can see which traffic is coming from which sources, but it's really hard and in some cases impossible to tie that aggregate Google Analytics data to actual leads or users who converted because it's aggregate anonymous data. There are some ways that you can get around that with some custom fields and other things like that. But again, you end up being pretty limited to looking at a first touch view or a last touch view. And we know that the modern customer journey is much more complex than that. The issue is further exacerbated by the fact that you have to look at conversion data within each individual ad platform. So it's very common for a customer. Let's talk about maybe a consumer brand or an e-commerce brand, right? Let me come to your website from an organic search and look at different products. Maybe you retarget them on Google Ads, and so you're driving awareness about those products. And then maybe they end up converting by clicking through an ad on Instagram or TikTok, right? How do you actually understand how to optimize your budget across all those channels if there are multiple touches across multiple ad platforms and they all have different influence? Very challenging to do that by looking at each individual system. And so a lot of our customers actually use RudderStack to help solve that problem. So number one, pulling in all the granular event data from all of the site visits and the touches across your website, mobile app, etc., is phenomenal because it includes all of the data about the referral, the UTM parameters that you're using for attribute, etc. And then everything that user does subsequently is captured as an event as well. When you pull, then if you think about pulling in your campaign performance data from all of those platforms. So I'm going to ingest my Meta campaign performance data, Google Ads, TikTok, all into my data warehouse. What do you have then? Now I have a very granular set of events that represent all of my interactions with this user across all my digital properties, my websites and mobile apps, that include UTM parameters and referrers. And then I have all the campaigns that I've run across all these platforms. And so when you combine those in your data warehouse, it's really powerful. You can see how much you spent on which campaigns and how many times a user interacted with those campaigns across platforms. And so it really gives you a much more granular level of visibility into it. Another thing is that RudderStack also has a product called Profiles, which helps automate a lot of that modeling for teams. So we talked about building that complete view of the customer. Our Profiles product can solve that identity resolution across those data sources. And so we've seen several companies rapidly get to really robust attribution models because we can help them not only get all of the customer journey data in as represented by events, but build out that complete customer profile so that it's much easier to do analytics around attribution. So that's my first story around optimizing ad spend.
Good story. Yeah, and your second story on AI, machine learning.
Yeah, AI is certainly the topic when it comes to data these days, which I think a lot of that, is related to large language models like ChatGPT. It's obviously a much broader subject beyond that. That's the big wave that's happening right now. A lot of people believe that every company is going to have some sort of machine learning driven or AI driven component of their products or services, which makes total sense. But one of the things with AI that's so interesting is that it still faces the fundamental limitation of every other data-driven project, which is that you have to have good data in order to make it work really well. And that is phenomenally difficult. I'll give you the second story is about one of our customers called Wise, as the name of the company. They sell smart home devices, so cameras, doorbells, etc. Really cool company, very cost effective. So you can get a smart camera for $40, I think. Really amazing. They really wanted to use, their AI team wanted to send campaigns that leverage churn prediction, right? So we have a customer, maybe they have subscribed to our monitoring service and they own a camera, and then they let their subscription expire, right? And of course, everyone knows the conventional wisdom of it's way cheaper to retain a customer than it is to go get a new one. How do you determine what are the ingredients you need to build an ML or AI model that can predict if someone's going to let their subscription expire? The inputs that you need are every possible touch point you have about that customer's interaction with you. How many times was their camera used? How many times did they open the app? How many times did they adjust their settings? Did they purchase anything new over a certain period of time? All of these different elements, right? What time of the year did they purchase it? Did they get it as a gift? There's all these different factors that are really important to have as inputs to an AI model so that you can accurately predict if a customer is going to churn. And so Wise really started from the beginning with RudderStack. And so they have 5 or 6 different properties across their mobile apps, web devices, subscription services, mobile apps, websites, subscription services, the tools that their customers use to manage their products, all of which are key inputs to ML or AI model.
Yeah.
And use RudderStack to ingest all of those events. So they had a comprehensive, complete view of the customer journey. From the first visit that someone came to the marketing site, to their interactions on the e-commerce site that led to them purchasing the product, to them firing up the mobile app on their iPhone when they activate their camera, to them looking at monitoring services on their phone, to the payments they made from their subscription, etc. So now you have all that data in your warehouse. They use our Profiles product to automate identity resolution. So you can imagine the challenges that they face from a data modeling standpoint, say when a customer buys additional devices. They had a camera, now they bought a doorbell, now they bought this other whatever system, right? And so Profiles from a data modeling standpoint allowed their engineering team to configure the identity model that they wanted to represent all their customers and all the traits. which before took months and months to update. Now it's updated automatically through RudderStack's Profiles product. And they're doing this all inside of a cloud data warehouse. They run on Snowflake's data cloud. And what's truly incredible actually is that the data and analytics team, they have all this comprehensive data on the user journey. They have these clean automated identity graphs in Snowflake's data cloud. And so their AI team literally just plugs right into that data and trains AI models right on the data. No separate infrastructure, no separate cloud environment. And so when they actually got that output, they started churning out 3 times more models than they had before. And then they use RudderStack to deliver the results from those models directly from their Snowflake data cloud into their marketing automation tool. And I think they've decreased churn by some major margin. I think it's double-digit percentages.
Wow. A lot of cost savings too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Eric, thank you so much for being on the show and putting the lights on the biggest mistakes companies make with data, and also shedding the light on how to fix them. So really appreciate that. I do encourage people to follow you on LinkedIn, get in touch with you, follow RudderStack, check it out, and of course, also tune into the Data Stack show.
Thank you so much for having me, George. This has been great.
It's been a pleasure.